All right, next up, player breakdowns. We got the consensus overall running back 2, the big dogs running back 4, J.K. Dobbins. The story of J.K. Dobbins is an interesting one, right? He broke out as a freshman, lit it up, and looked absolutely explosive playing for Ohio back in the J.T. Barrett days. He put up 200 carries for 1,400 yards, so 7 yards per attempt. That is not easy to do, especially in a Power 5 conference and in the Big Ten. 22 receptions for 135 yards. So there's no doubt this guy produced. But then he took like a weird little dip in his sophomore, right? With Dwayne Haskins at the helm. He went for more carries, so 230 carries, so about 36 more carries for only about 1,000 yards. So his yards per carry, his efficiency plummeted. From the receiving perspective, he was still very good. He got 26 catches for 263 yards. So still kind of that explosive player. There were some rumors about him maybe dealing with an injury. I didn't really see anything to actually substantiate it, so I can't really say. I have my theories, and I'm sure Noah will cover a little bit more detail, but I think it has a lot to do with the fact that he didn't have a mobile quarterback because JT was a dual threat. And then this year, he exploded again with my man, Justin Fields, at quarterback. 300 attempts, 2,000 yards. So one of the two guys to get 2,000 yards this year, him and JT. 6.7 yards per carry, 21 tutties on the ground, another 23 receptions, 240 yards through the air, and 10 yards per catch. So this guy is definitely a full three-down threat, right? I mean, maybe he's not as good as Swift on the pass pro side, but he definitely brings a lot to the receiving game. But, you know, it's a little bit of that roller coaster with him, right? Like, what are your thoughts on that, Noah? Like, does that hurt his value for you at all? Or do you kind of just say, like, whatever, man, like, let's look at the last year and focus on that?
It's weird for me because a lot of these other guys, I know Cam Akers had that dip in his sophomore year as well, but the fact that J.K. Dobbins showed that dip, and we can kind of attribute it to two things, his offensive line and his quarterback play. You look at their rank in adjusted line yards these past 3 years, they were 8th in both 2019 and 2017 and 65th the year prior to this year. It shows me that more than the other guys that he's a little bit more landing spot dependent, right? Whether it be the offensive line there, which you could make that case for any running back, right? If Jonathan Taylor lands in like Miami, he probably won't be as good as if he had landed in San Francisco. But the fact that J.K. Dobbins has shown that, and the splits like with and without an athletic mobile quarterback, is huge. I forgot who was tweeting it, but it was another guy who watches a ton of film, and he's like, yeah, I think a lot of the reason for his drop off in production was the fact that a Justin Fields could take away a linebacker that was spying him, or with a J.T. Barrett, having another defender focusing on the quarterback rather than the running back makes running lanes a lot easier. And that's really bared out looking at his efficiency stats. His broken tackle percentage these past 3 years, in the 2 years where he had a really good offensive line, it was 25.8% and 22.9%, both very respectable. In the 1 year with Haskins, 19%. So it's a big drop off. He wasn't breaking as many tackles when he didn't have enough time behind the line of scrimmage. On top of that, his yards after contact per attempt were 3.5 and 4.0 in the 2 years with mobile quarterbacks, dropped down to 2.7. So 0.8 less than 2019 and 1.3 less than the year with JT Barrett. That goes to show me, just putting words to those numbers, is when he didn't have the offensive line blocking for him as well, when he was seeing more defenders at and before the line of scrimmage, he wasn't as good at creating after the contact he saw. He wasn't as efficient behind the line of scrimmage as somebody like Cam Akers we saw him do, Jonathan Taylor we've seen them do in the face of, good stout competition. And that's enough for me to make him my running back 4 at this point, because if DeAndre Swift showed this drop down in the collegiate level, then that'd be a concern I obviously have for him. The fact that J.K. Dobbins actually showed it, there's a reason behind it. If he lands in a spot like a Miami, if they don't draft Tua or anything, and they're stuck with Ryan Fitzpatrick, who isn't mobile at this part of his career, and he's running behind a bad offensive line with an immobile quarterback, I worry for him. There's a lot of other landing spots. Like if he lands with the Jets, right, and Sam Darnold, not a great mobile quarterback and not a great offensive line, that's another spot I'm worried about. It's just, at this point, we don't know draft capital. We don't know landing spot. But if we're just going with a straight mediocre landing spot for all these guys, I think Dobbins may have the hardest time bringing fantasy relevance, because even though you say he's a good pass catcher, he wasn't as efficient as a lot of these other guys, even less so than Jonathan Taylor. You look at his yards after contact per reception, it was only 2.1, which ranked 53rd out of 73 running backs. His broken tackles per reception ranked 63rd out of 73 qualifying running back. He was good in yards after catch with 9.91. Then again, he's one of these guys that's used heavily in the screen game, so that's a lot easier, especially when the offensive line on screen plays is meant to block for you, right? They go out, they pull, and they get out of head of the pack, and it's easy for you to gain yards after the catch when you have 300-pound behemoths blocking for you. So yeah, just efficiency-wise, he wasn't up there with the other guys, especially not with Swift. So if we're comparing him and Taylor, who I think are the most comparable in this draft class for their receiving ability, I'm not so sure we can just say that Jonathan Taylor is a worse pass catcher than J.K. Dobbins because he was used more inconsistently than Dobbins. I think it's a lot closer than people seem. We saw enough out of Jonathan Taylor this past year, and even Although, the combine isn't something that you should use to see how good of a pass catcher somebody is, he looked confident out there and he had some pretty good catches. J.K. Dobbins, on the other hand, had some pretty big drops. One against Indiana where it was just a simple out route. There was literally nobody around him, out in the flat, dropped it. Against Clemson, it was an over-the-shoulder grab, but if you want somebody to be a weapon of the passing game, that's something you have to haul in, and he just didn't. In the biggest moments, he dropped some pretty big balls. I'm not going to say that he's a terrible pass catcher. I think he's somebody like an Ezekiel Elliott who could be used in that facet of the game if it's asked of him, but he's definitely no Swift, and if he lands in a bad landing spot, I'm not so sure he's just a locked and loaded RB1 like the other top three, in my opinion, are.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to see the rise of J.K. Dobbins this year because I think a lot of people kind of wrote him off after last year. I know a ton of people that I respect that have him as the RB1 in the class. Look, I don't want people to think we're throwing a ton of shade at J.K. Dobbins, but
Still
if
a
you
fantastic runner.
yeah,
You
still
see
a
in the
great
clips,
back.
he's like one cut and gone, but
Yeah,
it's splitting hairs, but I think he is the biggest gap between the other top three.
yeah, and I think look, if you look at the film that we put up and some of the cut-ups, I want you to watch what the defenders do on every single run that Justin Fields runs an RPO, which is basically every single play. I want you to focus on the linebacker or that edge defender that's responsible for Fields and see how they freeze, right? And because Dobbins is such a great athlete, and I know he didn't run the combine, but if you look at some of his high school stuff, he won the Nike Spark competition in high school, so he was actually the best athlete of the class. He ran a 4.45 40 coming out of high school. Now, again, maybe he runs a little bit slower now. We saw freaking Dalvin Ahmed. Everyone thought he was going to run a 4.3 and he went out there and ran a 4.6. So his career is probably over. But he is an explosive athlete, right? So when you give him that type of space by taking that extra defender out of the picture, he's going to make plays, right? And if he lands in a place that allows him to do that, imagine if he lands on Baltimore. He would be a great fit in Baltimore because of the threat of Lamar Jackson. He's used to that type of system and he's used to working with that type of space. But like you said, if he lands with a Phillip Rivers, let's say Phillip Rivers goes to Tampa Bay and then he goes to Tampa Bay and you got Phillip Rivers and J.K. Dobbins and Tampa Bay, I'm a little bit concerned about how he translates. But he is an explosive athlete. He is a capable pass catcher. So from a fantasy perspective, we love that. And, a lot of the talking heads have him as pretty high draft capital. So if those things still line up, let's say J.K. Dobbins lands in Indianapolis and they take him in the top of the second round, right? And Akers goes in the fourth, I'm going to have to move J.K. Dobbins up because that's just opportunity is king when it comes to running backs. It's going to be important what he does in his pro day. What I will say is, dude, were you shocked at how light he came in the combine?
Yeah, what was it, 209?
Yeah.
I thought it was going to be at least 215. He looked big. I don't know why he cut all that weight and then he benched and left. But he looked a lot bigger to me up until this point. And the fact that he was basically the same weight as Anthony McFarland, who's a sprinter. I don't know. It was weird.
That really, I was really surprised by that. Like you, I was expecting him to come in at 215, closer to Cam Akers because he looks that big and that thick. He looks like a muscle hamster, Doug Martin type vibes, Mark Ingram type vibes. So I was a little bit surprised by that. And then him not running is not ideal because it's not that people don't think he's athletic, but it's that the light kind of shifts and focuses on the other people that did blow up the combine. Taylor, Swift, Akers, everybody kind of exceeded or at least met expectations. So it'll be interesting to see where he lands and, what he actually what his playing weight is. Where would you like to see Dobbins go? What do you think is a good spot for him? I actually thought that Chargers would be a cool spot for him.
That'd be decent. Have Eckler take over the pass catching role while he's in between the
tackles. Yeah, you have two guys, Dobbins, great runner, obviously, and capable pass catcher. And, he kind of really take over that Melvin Gordon role. He's a little bit smaller, so probably has to work a little bit on the pass pro side. But, and then if they have freaking Ty God, over there, kind of in that bridge year, a dual threat quarterback, I think that'll be key for Dobbins. And that's going to be something I'm looking for. If he lands in a dual threat place, even Cardinals, if the Cardinals somehow take him, I think he becomes really interesting at that point, but I'm going to be a little bit more wary if he lands in a traditional pocket passer that doesn't have a fantastic O-line or anything like that.
Yeah, I think the main takeaway is we're just a little bit concerned from the dip in production and the fact that came from an immobile quarterback and bad line play. And then also the fact that the other top three guys destroyed the combine while J.K. Dobbins sat out. So we know a little bit more about the concrete athleticism of the top three. We also didn't see as many glaring holes in his game as J.K. Dobbins. This isn't to say we hate J.K. Dobbins. I know Mike already said that, but J.K. Dobbins is a fantastic running back. If he lands even in Arizona, like you said, it's going to be wheels up because he is a great runner, and he showed that in 2 out of 3 years of his career. But that's all we got for him. He's currently our RB4. He could easily move into that first tier. I know you said you don't like to have guys jump, but I'd venture to say he's probably like very close to the first tier for you. For me, he's like right on that line as well. I would just include him on there. If he's picked ahead of Akers and has better draft capital than Akers, I have no problem making him my RB3.
That's all we got for Dobbins. We love them all, guys. I mean, this is a great running back class, so get excited. If you have a top 4 pick, it's going to be good times ahead, guys. It's going to be good times ahead.
Catch you next time, hitting up the receivers.
Peace.